Skyblocks are perhaps one of the greatest challenges you can take on in vanilla Terraria. From the in-depth knowledge required to make any kind of meaningful progress, to the massively restricted options you'll have to use against bosses. Playing this niche game mode will test all of your limits. With that being said, it seems I haven't learned my lesson from the last Skyblock I did, as I'm back to grind my way through an arguably even more difficult map, where something as simple as a workbench will take multiple hours and many steps to obtain. If that doesn't sound hard enough, I've also decided to take on this map in Legendary mode, a decision that even I don't fully understand. So let's get started. The first thing you'll notice upon spawning into the world is that there isn't much, but surprisingly, this small island holds everything we'll need to beat the game. There's no trickery with medium core, which I'm very thankful for, as I can't think of anything worse than a Legendary mode skyblock in medium core. Instead, we'll need to use the few blocks we have on the starter island to progress. These ice bricks can be thrown into the shimmer to decraft them into ice blocks, which can then be crafted into ice platforms for twice as many usable tiles. I carefully collect all of these, replacing the bricks surrounding the shimmer with blocks. I do end up falling into the shimmer a couple of times, but this is nothing a relog can't fix. In the end, I'm left with 30 usable ice platforms, minus the one being used as my spawn point. Using these, I begin to expand downwards into the underground layer. This map uses a variety of secret seeds, including remix, so the only enemies I'll find on the surface are zombies, which don't drop anything particularly useful. From enemies in the underground though, I can obtain quite a few items that will make this run a little more bearable. The most common enemy, slimes, can rarely drop ores which can be used as extra blocks, potions which can be decrafted into some useful items, and since this is remix, slimes are also the only source of fallen stars. There's also the incredibly rare chance that slimes will drop the slime staff, but it's so unlikely that I'm not even considering this. From undead miners I could get the bone pickaxe or some mining armour, which is somewhat ironic considering the distinct lack of blocks to mine. However, I can also get bombs from these, which will be incredibly useful once I have access to dirt. We then have a few enemies that can drop weapons that would massively speed up my farming, but aren't necessarily game-changing drops. Included in these are regular skeletons, whose bone sword would be a welcome upgrade to my copper one, cave bats, who can drop both the bat and, since this is a remix world, the KO cannon, and the trio of salamanders, giant shellies and crawdads, who can all drop the rally. There's also a very rare mob that I'll be keeping secret for now, but I'm sure some of you can guess which one I mean. I'm not looking for any of these enemies though, or at least, I'm not looking for any of them in particular. The most useful drop at this point can come from any enemy, and that's money. While I can't yet build housing for NPCs, there is one NPC I can trade with that doesn't require any housing at all, so I keep taking out enemies and stacking my money high. Oh, and dying. A lot of dying. For a long while, the only notable drops are some bombs, fallen stars, a compass, and a carton of milk that definitely expired long before the skeleton carrying it was dead, buried, brought back to life, and slowly killed again in a small icebox with a copper short sword. Eventually, after 3.5 hours of jumping between platforms, I get the spawn I actually wanted, that being the skeleton merchant. I carefully block the two of us in so no enemies can drop in from above, then collect my hoarded gold to buy over 1,000 rope, 16 bone torches, and 56 bombs before running out of money. It's no matter though, as this should be plenty of bombs to carry me to the point that the demolitionists can move in. With rope I can now descend much deeper into my world, so I pack up all the blocks and platforms at my disposal and go on a vacation to hell, which is surprisingly hospitable at this time of year. The only enemies that can spawn in the centre third of hell are lava slimes and the secret enemy I haven't yet named, both of which are very easy to trap, allowing for a much larger spawn area than other layers. Unfortunately, however, the lava slimes don't drop anything other than gel and money, so after around 40 minutes of farming here, I bring an end to my vacation and head north to the caverns, which in this seed is actually the surface, and also kind of the ocean. I don't know, the remix seed is weird. It doesn't take long for the super secret mob to spawn, and if you guessed it was a mimic then you guessed correctly and have earned yourself a moderate amount of my respect. To claim your prize, simply like this video and leave a comment stating exactly how many hours you've spent memorising the Terraria wiki. After slowly poking the mimic to death with a weapon that deals 1 damage to it, I get incredibly lucky and it drops the most useful item it could drop, that being the magic mirror. Now you may be wondering, how does an item that simply allows me to teleport home in any way useful in a skyblock? Well, it isn't, at least not in its current form. Once I throw it into the shimmer, however, it decrafts into 8 gold bars, 10 glass blocks, and 3 diamonds. Now this isn't Minecraft, so the diamonds are quite useless, but the other 2 components are going to give me everything I need to get a staggering amount of blocks compared to what I've been working with, and also sets me down a path towards a workbench, furniture, and NPC housing. I take the gold and shimmer it into gold ore, then take 25 of those and shimmer them into tungsten, then silver, then lead, then iron, then tin, then copper, then stone, and eventually dirt. I also take the 10 glass and shimmer it into 20 sand, which I then place on the surface in the hopes that it will grow cactus over time. I can then combine the dirt with the bombs I got from the undead miners and skeleton merchant to make dirt bombs, which when exploded will generate over twice as many dirt blocks as was used to craft them. It takes a full half hour of exploding, mining, and crafting dirt bombs to get through almost all of the 60 bombs I had on me, netting me over 1600 dirt to work with. I do hold a couple bombs back, so that once I have housing the demolitionist can move in. With my newfound supply of dirt, I get straight to work upgrading my mob farm, and spend some time there hoping for a weapon upgrade. Another mimic spawns, and after my 6-minute fight with it, I get a shiny pair of Hermes boots, so I can run faster across all the blocks in this world. After another couple hours with no useful drops, I descend once again to the underworld and set up a farm there. Since the camera stops moving at the bottom of the world, I can see enemies that spawn and keep an eye out for any mimics. While the lava slimes don't drop any useful items, they do drop money, so I take them out regardless. After a while a third mimic spawns and drops a pair of shoe spikes, which somehow might actually be my most useful accessory so far. Upon returning home perfectly voluntarily, I find that after over 3 hours, only a single cactus has grown. That's nowhere near quick enough for the amount I need for housing, so I collect up the sand and head down to the cavern lair. I'm met by a surprise goblin scout, which I guess doesn't have the same spawn restrictions in the remix seed. From it I get some tattered cloth, which will be very useful later on. For now though, I place my sand down once again and begin moving up and down my rope, hoping for an antlion spawn. Just like goblin scouts, these appear to have different spawn restrictions in Remix when compared to normal worlds. Usually you'd need at least 40 sand blocks for an antlion to spawn, but in this map it can be as low as 10. Before one spawns though, a mimic is kind enough to give me a weapon upgrade in the form of the mace. After another 20 minutes of rope bouncing, an antlion spawns and I begin harvesting its sandy vomit for blocks. I AFK here for around an hour. Then while trying to kill some enemies I end up dying and losing the antlion, so I have to go through the entire process of getting another one. At least I have more sand now, so I can create a much larger spawn platform. My next AFK session lasts even less time and is cut short by a rather unlucky falling star. I learn my lesson from this and place a roof over my next antlion. After going through this process for a third time, I finally have enough sand to build an artificial desert and still have some spare. So I return to the surface and start laying out some rows of sand, as cactus grows much faster on the surface than it does underground. Even with the surface boost, this still takes a long time, so I end up getting a fourth antlion to spawn and AFK while the cactus grows. At least I should never have to worry about sand again in this playthrough. When I return to the game, I collect up all the cactus from my underground platform and ascend my rope ladder to see that my cactus farm worked perfectly, and after chopping down each one while leaving the bottom block to regrow, I'm left with a grand total of 82 cactus, way more than the 10 needed to craft a workbench. This groundbreaking feat of engineering will unlock an entire new age of progress, first of which is housing. So I craft up some basic tables and chairs, then get to work building the most luxurious dirt hotel rooms known to man, with complimentary chairs made of cactus for extra comfort. When trying to place the tables, I realise they're too big to fit the snug and cosy floor plans of the rooms, so I have to decraft these and collect some more cactus to make workbenches instead. Thankfully, the Shimmer makes mistakes like these much less costly. Soon after construction wraps up, the merchant moves in, so I collect all the gold I stacked up from killing mobs and start putting it to use. First I buy an anvil for crafting, and a piggy bank so I no longer have to stack money in world. While doing so, the demolitionist attempts to check in, but takes a wrong turn on his way to the resort. I test out which will be a better source of wood between the copper pickaxe and axe, and at 4 silver compared to 5, the axe works out slightly cheaper for the exact same amount of wood. Unfortunately, that amount is still 1, so I have to buy and shimmer a lot of them to get any kind of usable amount. Meanwhile, the copper from the axes can be shimmered down into stone, allowing me to make my first furnace to smelt ores. Not that I have any. Lastly, I buy another anvil and a bug net, which when combined will allow me to start fishing. To do that though, I first have to decraft the anvil into iron bars and then craft those bars into buckets. I then carry these down to the underworld and begin expanding my platform to the left. I stop once I see hellbats can spawn, as these are the key to obtaining water. In normal worlds in expert mode or above, lava slimes will drop a block of lava when killed. However, in remix worlds this is changed to the hellbats, so that the player isn't drowned by lava immediately upon spawning into the underworld. After killing a couple and collecting the scalding hot bat blood, I return to the surface with 2 filled buckets of lava. I throw one of these into the shimmer to turn it into honey, and then throw it in again to get water, taking me one step closer to fishing. There's one more thing I need though, and that's bait, so I head to my caverns farm and begin converting it into another franchise of my hotel chain, by which point both the demolitionist and zoologist have moved into the surface hotel. I buy the squirrel hook and guide to critter companionship from the zoologist, then upgrade the demolitionist and guide to our new premium suites in the caverns. After cleaning up some of the unnecessary blocks, I begin farming for bait, and it seems I picked the perfect time to do so, as it starts raining shortly after, massively increasing my chances of catching worms. I also get incredibly lucky and catch a gold worm, which I throw into the shimmer to get a permanent increase to my fishing power. By the time the rain ends, I have over 100 worms, but before I start using these, I'd like to get the broadly hated but highly recommended NPC that is the angler. To do so, I bridge out to the right and build a small pool of water there. Due to some more remix seed tomfoolery, the cavern's lair somewhat acts as the ocean, and the angler will spawn on top of water as long as I'm outside of the centre third of the world. I create a fishing pool in both the caverns and on the surface, then place down some more sand to create an artificial desert, which covers pretty much all the available biomes I have for quest fish at the moment. I make sure to do these quests whenever possible, fishing in the desert between them in the hopes of getting a better rod from oasis crates. I never do get one, but I do get a pink pearl from an oyster, which I shimmer into a galaxy pearl for a permanent increase to my luck. Blindly fishing with an incredibly low fishing power is not how you should tackle a map like this, so instead I pivot my attention to crafting a bed so I can massively speed up the time between quests. The first step of this process is to decraft some of the danger sense potions I found inside crates, giving me cobwebs. I then place down a few of my many graves until I get ectomist, allowing me to turn the cobwebs into spider walls. Throwing these into shimmer will turn them into infested spider walls, which aside from causing arachnophobia when placed down, can also spawn cobwebs over time. With enough of these I should be able to make a bed, but it's a very slow process, so I continue to do some more fishing in the background, setting a timer for 24 minutes between fishing quests. With enough time and patience, I gather the cobwebs needed to craft the silk needed to craft a bed, which increases my quest completion rate from around 2 per hour all the way to 10. So that's exactly what I do for the next 4 hours, slowly getting better and better fishing gear with each quest, until one day, while looking for a quest fish in the surface, I reel in a particularly shiny crate, and within said crate I find a particularly shiny crystal, that when consumed grants me an additional 20 life. This is the only way to get life crystals in Shimmering Skies, and is the entire reason I'm investing so much time into fishing and fishing quests. And it's paying off, as after another half hour of completing quests I get the golden fishing rod, taking me from a measly 15% fishing power to the maximum of 50. I'm not done with quests just yet though, and one night while sleeping between them I am alerted to a blood moon creeping up on the horizon. This is an excellent opportunity to get some pretty powerful weapons, so I set up a one-way hoik and start fishing up blood moon enemies. By morning I've amassed quite a number of them, and it takes a while to process my way through them. I'm helped out in this regard by a vampire frog staff that drops from one of the enemies, and it's at this point I decide that a hybrid summoner loadout will probably be the best for this playthrough. That's going to require a lot more than one minion slot though, and I have 2 ways to increase this before killing any bosses. First of which is a Flink's fur coat. In most Skyblocks this would be unobtainable until unlocking White Solution after killing the Moonlord, but thanks to the unique starting blocks of Shimmering Skies, we can actually get Flinksies to spawn. Now it's worth noting that these are still incredibly rare, and to craft both the Flink's fur coat and the Flink staff, we'll need to kill at least 5 of them, and that's with the maximum drop rate. All that to say, I was going to need to spend a lot of time in this farm, so I set up a pool of water to keep myself occupied with some more fishing. While doing so, I managed to get the second item that increases our minion slots, that being the Wizard's Hat. Now I know what you're saying, since when did this magic focus headpiece give an increase to minion slots? Don't worry, you're not going crazy and I'm not using mods. This is simply a change made in worlds where the celebration seed is toggled on, and in this case it counteracts the fact that I can't get summoning potions until after I kill either Skeletron or the Eye of Cthulhu. And speaking of, after some more fishing and farming Flinksies, I take a break to open some more of the crates that I'd collected, and inside the golden ones I found my 5th and 6th life crystals. Consuming just one of these would push me over the 200 health threshold needed for the Eye of Cthulhu to spawn, and is the next step on my path towards touching grass. But before I consume it, I want to make sure I'm ready for the fight itself, so I return to my farm to get the rest of the Flink's fur needed to craft both the fur coat and the staff, then spend an unreasonable amount of time dying in the underworld while trying to get a demon scythe to drop. After over an hour I give in and consume the 5th life crystal, signalling to the Eye that I was ready to take it on. Before that though, I wanted to take advantage of my higher health in another way, as in addition to needing 200 health for the Eye to spawn, you also need this amount to summon the Goblin army, which my minions and I slowly make our way through in the most cowardly way possible. The drops from the goblins themselves aren't very important, although the spiky balls do help against the Eye's final phase. No, the real reason I did this was to get the Goblin Tinkerer, and after finding him in the caverns, I buy his workshop and rocket boots and get to work making some upgraded accessories. First comes combining my various informational accessories to take up much less space in my inventory. I then craft a pair of amphibian boots, a blue horseshoe balloon, a sharkron balloon, and some tiger climbing gear. I also condense my 3 fishing accessories into the angler tackle box, giving me a lot more slots to use in my fishing loadout. With that, all I can really do now is wait for the Eye of Cthulhu to spawn, and while I do I may as well continue farming for the demon scythe. Another hour goes by and I still have no demon scythe, but I do have a feeling that there's an evil presence watching me, so I collect up some potions and head to my arena to take down my first boss of the playthrough. Defeating the Eye is significant in this playthrough for many reasons. Firstly, the Shield of Cthulhu is a pretty neat accessory, but more importantly, the Dryad can now spawn, who is one of the most important NPCs in this playthrough. The Eye also drops some Crimson Seeds, so I fill up my underground fishing spot with dirt and plant them, by which time the Dryad has moved in. I buy some grass seeds from her, and after 30 hours of grind, I can finally do the first thing that most players do upon spawning into a world: touch grass. At this point, I've spent over 30 hours in this world and only killed one boss, and I'd like to change that. Other than hoping for a random King Slime spawn, the next boss I can work towards is Queen Bee. For that I'm going to need a jungle though, so I lay down some rows of mud which will double as a plantera bulb and life fruit farm in hard mode. Getting jungle grass to spawn on this is going to be much more difficult though, and is for the moment restricted by the growth of my crimson biome. While this grows, I extended my hill bridge across the entire right side of the underworld, a decision which I am sure I won't live to regret. By the time that's done, my crimson has expanded to the point where I can now fish in it, obtaining a bunch of new goodies such as the panic necklace, crimson rod, the rotted fork, and after a second session, the undertaker. Having this in my inventory allows the arms dealer to move in, so I buy a mini shark and plenty of bullets to use with it. Unfortunately at this point, there's not much I can do other than watching grass grow, fishing, sleeping, and of course, fighting my demons in hell for the off chance that they offer me a book in return. Eventually the crimson grass does grow, and I can now engage in phase 2 of my plan for a jungle. Usually you'd just buy some purification powder from the Dryad to turn this crimson mud into jungle grass, but once again the remix seed rears its ugly head to make this process at least a little bit more complex. You see, in remix worlds, the Dryad doesn't sell purification powder. Instead you have to go to the bother of growing crimson grass, hoping that a vicious mushroom spawns on it, turning that vicious mushroom into vicious powder, and finally throwing that vicious powder into Shimmer to get purification powder. All that to say, we now have jungle grass, at least a single block of it, which will take multiple hours to grow into a full-on jungle, meaning that for me it's back to fishing, sleeping, and fighting demons. After a while I figure out a much quicker way to get a jungle biome. If I replace some of the mud blocks with dirt, I can then place grass seeds on them, use vicious powder to turn it into crimson grass, and leave it for a while to spread to the nearby mud blocks. While that grows in the background, I construct a small arena below the farm to use as my Queen Bee arena, even going so far as to cover the whole thing in walls so that enemies don't spawn inside it. By the time I'm around halfway through this, the crimson grass has spread to the point where I can use purification powder on it to get jungle grass, without needing to wait multiple hours for it to grow on its own. Then, while finishing up the walls on the arena, King Slime spawns from a random slime kill. This has a small chance of happening every time you kill a slime in remix seeds, as a replacement for slime rain which cannot occur. The fight is pretty easy, with the only real danger coming right at the end where he hits me twice in quick succession. But I managed to take him down all the same and get lucky enough for his bag to drop the slimy saddle. With that small distraction out of the way, I finish off the arena and get started fishing in my newly formed jungle biome. From the crates I get a boomstick, anklet of the wind, staff of regrowth, feral claws, and a fiberglass fishing pole. All in all, some of the best loot I've got so far, minus the fishing pole as it's already outclassed by my goldenrod. I take down some jungle enemies so I can use their drops to craft a snapthorn, then create some honey blocks using water and honey, throw a few of them into Shimmer to get hive blocks, and use these to create the abomination needed to spawn Queen Bee, which I quickly regret. Now me dying here is likely just a skill issue, but I still decide that before my rematch I want to make a blade of grass, hoping that it might help. It didn't, and I died once again to Queen Bee. I then decided to change things up and die to Skeletron instead, which you could argue probably wasn't the best idea. In all reality, these boss fights were really just another distraction from what I should have been doing this whole time. Spending yet another hour and a half of my life in the underworld farming for a demon scythe. I hope this small collection of banners goes some way to conveying how long farming for this drop took. And that's not even all of them. I also have a bunch in chests at spawn, and have deleted a lot to save on inventory space. Regardless, it was all worth it, as I now had potentially the best free hard mode weapon available in this map, and it sees absolutely no issue in destroying Queen Bee. Wait, that wasn't supposed to happen. Well, at least I got close, which proves this strategy can be effective. So I resummon the queen bee and focus more on dodging, and this time I come out victorious. The bee gun is probably the best weapon drop I could have got from her, and I also now have the honeycomb and hive pack to synergise with it, along with the beeswax needed to make a hornet staff. All that to say, I was now ready for a rematch with Skeletron. I said, I was now ready for a rematch with Skeletron. That's more like it. With Skeletron down, my next major goal is defeating the Wall of Flesh, which you may think won't be too difficult. We have a completely open area in the underworld to fight it, have some of the most damaging weapons in pre-hard mode, and have excellent accessories for both mobility and damage. Now, while all that is true, it's also worth noting that this map uses a custom world size, which is just under half the width of the smallest vanilla world. I'd also like to remind you that this is in Legendary mode, which means the wall has double the health that it would normally have in Master mode, along with being much faster and having more defense. Needless to say, I have my work cut out for me. The first thing I can do to increase my damage output is negate the need for mobility accessories. I do this by laying a rail all the way across the underworld, which has the added benefit of not letting fire imps spawn, which is also a thing the wall will do in Legendary mode. With these slots freed up from mobility accessories, I can then focus on refilling them with damaging ones. The first of which is obviously the Sharktooth necklace. So I spawn a Blood Moon and tear through the enemies until one drops. I then combine this with the honeycomb from the Queen Bee to make the Stinger necklace, perhaps the best damage boosting accessory in pre-hard mode. I then buy the Pygmy necklace from the Witch Doctor for an extra minion, and equip the Bone Glove dropped by Skeletron, then head back to the underworld and start my second attempt against the wall. The Demon Scythe did deal decent damage to the wall, but even if the lasers didn't kill me, I wouldn't have managed to kill the wall before reaching the end of my world. In short, I need to find a way to increase both my damage and survivability, which is remarkably difficult considering you usually have to trade one for the other. First I try out switching to melee and use the Star Fury in the hopes of hitting multiple segments at once. Having to stay so close to the wall to deal damage hurts my health even more, so I have to retreat every so often to regain health while dealing no damage, so it's clear this strategy won't work. Next I thought I'd try out the Blood Rainbow, mainly to see how good its damage would be. Usually this bow would be entirely impractical to use against the wall, as its projectiles don't pass through blocks. But given the entire point of this playthrough is that there isn't many blocks, that's not an issue. What is an issue, however, is the fact that this deals even less damage and puts me in more danger than the Demon Scythe, which after my testing still looked like the best option. I was somehow going to have to make the Demon Scythe work, and my first thought was to add an extra line of rails just above my current one so that I could dodge the lasers and stay alive a little longer. This ends up being more difficult than I was expecting, as once you're on the top rail the only way to drop to the bottom one is to dismount and remount at just the right time, otherwise you'll fall through and be stuck on the platform below. Even when the transition does go smoothly, I lose all momentum upon reaching the lower track, so it seems track switching is out of the question too. That means taking damage from the lasers, and if I'm going to be taking damage I may as well benefit from it. So I place down enough graves to make yet another graveyard biome, and combine my Panic Necklace with a Mana Crystal to get a Band of Star Power. With this and a Band of Regeneration I can craft a Band of Mana Generation, and combining that with a Shackle will get me Mana Cuffs, granting me a small boost of mana when I'm hit. You may also know that I've been at 380 health for quite some time now, and that's because I was planning to avoid any more fishing until I got to hard mode. It's seeming that won't be possible at this point with how much damage I'm taking from the Wall of Flesh, so unfortunately I have to pick up my rod once again for a final fishing grind of pre-hard mode. This wouldn't be so bad if I didn't run out of crate potions almost immediately, and I don't want to pay the steep herb cost to craft some myself, so I have to go back to completing quests every 5 minutes in the hopes that the angler gives me some. Once again, sleeping between fishing quests appears to be the only option, until a blood moon comes along to keep me up all night. Then it's back to sleeping until another blood moon keeps me up all night, and then back to sleeping and oh look, another blood moon! At least I have some crate potions by now, so I can peacefully fish for extra life crystals to max out my health. Are you kidding me? That's the 4th blood moon in 5 nights! Regardless of the incessant blood moons, I eventually collect up 10 gold crates, and within them I find 3 life crystals, enough to top off my health, shimmer one into a vital crystal, and even have one left over for a heart lantern. This may be enough to solve my survivability issues, but there's still the issue of dealing enough damage to the wall before I reach the end of this tiny world. For that, I place a rail much higher than the 2 I'd placed already, and shoot the demon scythe downwards instead of straight at the wall, as this way I can hit all 3 segments of the wall if my aim is just right. My first test proves that this definitely is possible, but by being so close to the hungry I end up taking too much damage and die very quickly, so I build a 4th rail as high as I can get without leaving the underworld and try again. But as with my last attempt, the hungry could still reach me and take me down. It's at this point I had to do something I was really hoping to avoid. It was clear I couldn't get far enough away from the hungry by going above the wall, so I'd have to try going below it. The only problem there is that, as I said earlier, I have a massive platform spanning the entire right side of my world, which fire imps can spawn on throughout the fight. So I have to meticulously take this down 1 block at a time, while fighting a continuous stream of lava bats and voodoo demons. After a lot of time, and even a few deaths, I clear the underworld of blocks and place my 5th railway across the width of it. Hoping that this will be my winning strategy, I spawn the wall of flesh once again and begin hurling demon scythes at it while keeping my distance. For the first half of the fight I was dealing excellent damage to the wall and avoiding most of the lasers and hungry. However, as the wall speeds up, I found it harder and harder to hit the boss itself, and it soon crossed the world with just under 10% of its health remaining. My next attempt was very similar, but my aim was slightly better. Enough to get it down to just 158 health before it slides off screen. I was sure that I'd be able to kill it on my next attempt, but then yet another tragedy struck. I was completely out of the moonglow I needed to brew magic power and mana regen potions, and I don't have any seeds to grow more. So far, all the moonglow I had came from decrafting the spelunker potions I'd found in fishing crates. But now that supply had run dry, I was going to need to wait another 3 whole hours before I could try fighting the wall of flesh again. I placed down as much mud and jungle grass as I could bear and slept through the days in the hopes that at least 1 moonglow would spawn. Eventually, during yet another blood moon, I spot one and break it to get 3 seeds. It's then time to switch to playing Stardew Valley until I have enough moonglow to craft all the potions I need. Then I summoned the wall of flesh one final time to escape pre-hard mode. All of the previous attempts served as excellent practice for this one, and my demon scythe tore through the wall of flesh and hungry alike, until eventually the wall was moving so fast that I wasn't even sure the scythes were hitting. But as I swapped to my grey zappinator to finish off the fight, the wall of flesh falls and hard mode begins. Hard mode in Skyblocks is surprisingly a lot safer than in traditional worlds. The fact that there's no caves you need to fight through means I die a lot less often than I normally would. But while it may be safer, I wouldn't go as far as saying it's easier. The first thing I do after shimmering my emblem is take down some spiders to craft the only sentry I'll be able to use on this world, which is quite a relief after my last playthrough. I'll also craft a full set of spider armour and a spider staff. This summoner loadout will be invaluable throughout early hard mode while I level up my other class options, but I'd prefer to use any other class for boss fights themselves, as Summoner suffers from a slight lack of defense that quickly becomes apparent in Legendary mode. I start off my grind by taking down enemies at my jungle farm, hoping to get some hard mode mimic drops. While doing this, I find the wizard and buy his crystal ball. Unlocking the wizard also means the witch doctor will now sell bewitchment tables, and I buy 2 of these so I can shimmer one into an alchemy table for that sweet reduced potion cost. The next few hours are spent farming various enemies and using their drops to make myself more powerful and less prone to death. Included in this is crafting both a Star Veil and Charm of Myths, which I also have to take through the laborious process of crafting and decrafting to get warding on them. Next up, I build another fishing spot and plant down some hallowed seeds I bought from the Dryad. Fishing here proves to be quite dangerous, with hallowed mimics frequently causing a premature end to my sessions. Regardless, this was successful enough to unlock a hard mode anvil from crate drops, and puts me well on my way to some hard mode armour. I just have to fish a little more. Okay, maybe a lot more, but at least I can also fish up some ebb and koi for wrath potions after I buy corrupt seeds from the dryad during a blood moon. After another hour of fishing, I take a break to fight some wyverns to upgrade my wings. The low gravity and the fact that flying off screen kills me makes this quite a challenge. At least by now I'd collected enough mithril for a full set of mage armour though, which made farming the pixie dust for fairy wings much less painful. I do try out some blood moon fishing in the middle of this, which goes about how you'd expect. Once I've collected enough pixie dust, I return to farming wyverns to get the souls of flight for my wings. These are a massive upgrade over the fledgling ones I've been using up to now, and fills me with the confidence I need to take on my first boss. But not before I go on yet another tangent to set up a glowing mushroom biome. I gather up some potions and head to my hallowed biome to summon Queen Slime, and quickly find out why I shouldn't have after not one, not two, but 3 biome mimics spawn. I manage to take down the first, but while trying to flee the other 2, my skull gets crushed. Rather annoyingly, this attempt uses up the last of my deathweed, and as with Moonglow earlier in this world, I also have no seeds to grow more. To fix this, I build a few layers of corrupt grass on the surface where herbs grow faster, and spend multiple hours waiting for deathweed to grow. Side note, deathweed will not grow in corrupt grass in Crimson Worlds, so this entire setup proves to be rather pointless, a fact which I won't learn for quite some time. While the deathweed doesn't grow in the background, I build out an arena in the ocean for Duke Fishron. The surface in this map is incredibly short, and going too high will result in low gravity and death, while going too low results in Duke enraging and also death. This means my arena has to be rather small vertically, so I try to make up for this by making it as wide as possible horizontally. All this preparation really pays off when I defeat Duke Fishron in the first try with no potions. He just got lucky with that one. I'm sure the next attempt will be much better. Well, the first 2 might have failed, but you know what they say. Third time lucky, right? Well, it's quite obvious that Duke won't be the first hard mode boss to fall. So I switch gears and build a platform across hell while suffering from a serious case of deja vu. I'm going to need this later on in the playthrough when I try to take on the monstrosity that is Medusa, a fight which I am absolutely terrified of. While legendary mode may make the mechs much more mighty, it also allows me to obtain certain materials that usually wouldn't be possible in Skyblock, or at least which would be much harder to get. The best example of this is the jungle mimic. This rare mob drops mostly joke items when killed, but I'm less interested in its drops and more in its vomit. This attack will spray out a collection of random blocks that includes most variants of stone, wood, sand, sandstone, and some other random blocks like red brick and silt. More interestingly though, this list of blocks also includes smooth marble and smooth granite blocks, making those biomes possible in Skyblock. There's not much I can get from these however, as they're predominantly pre-hard mode biomes. Although interestingly, this does make gladiator armour a viable option as the only way to get knockback immunity in the map. A potentially much more useful biome is the ice biome, as the mimic also spits out ice, ice brick, snow, and snow brick. Aside from fighting the Frost Legion at Christmas, this is the only way to get a snow biome pre-Moonlord. That's right, we've come full circle from harvesting antlion vomit to make a desert biome, to harvesting jungle mimic vomit to make a snow biome. Skyblock truly is a riveting experience. Each time the mimic attacks, only a few blocks are harvested, so this project will tick away in the background while I work on other things. Other things includes, but is not limited to, farming mobs for mechanical boss summons, searching for gelatin crystals in my underground hallowed, fighting the wall of flesh to get another emblem, having Queen Slime ghost me halfway through a second date, and immediately dying when she tries to sit on my face during our fourth. Since I wasn't having any luck with Queen Slime or Duke Fishron, I decided to try my luck against Medusa. The fight was going reasonably well until I got to the end of my railway, and with another few attempts I probably could take it down. However, the Medusa summons are incredibly costly, as my only way to get mechanical skulls is to hope they drop from enemies at a rate of 1 in 2,500. That meant it was back to Queen Slime attempts, and thankfully I was able to kill her twice the next day, giving me a full set of Crystal Assassin armour as another option. I try to use this against Duke Fishron, thinking the longer dash might allow me to dodge a little better, and it did, allowing me to survive a grand total of 10 seconds instead of 3. It's shortly after this that I finally realise my surface corruption will never grow deathweed, so I replace it all with crimson and summon the goblin army while waiting for the next full moon or blood moon. My reason for fighting the goblins was to get the Shadow Flame knife. By switching to melee, I was hoping I'd be able to survive a few more hits against the beefed up bosses, and this weapon is one of the best for early hard mode warriors. I get it on my first try and then get started on a set of armour with more defence, which means I am once again back on that fishing grind. But hey, it wouldn't be a skyblock without an excessive amount of fishing for crates, would it? 30 minutes of fishing later it's a full moon, so I head to my newly formed Surface Crimson and find the much needed Deathweed seeds. With the help of my Axe of Regrowth, I'll be able to take this small amount of seeds and turn it into more Deathweed than I could hope to use in one playthrough. I went back to fishing for crates before realising a much faster way to get these was to use lava fishing. Now while this is definitely slower than water fishing per catch, it comes with the unique benefit that every single crate I reel in is able to obtain either titanium or adamantite bars, meaning I don't waste crate rolls on pearlwood and mithril crates which cannot contain these. With this strategy, I quickly amass enough bars to craft a full set of adamantite armour, taking my defence from 72 all the way to 86 without buffs. I'm pretty much as ready as I can be to fight Medusa now, but have a distinct lack of mechanical skulls. My first attempt to collect some more was farming lava slimes in Hell. The inner thirds of Hell have the advantage of only spawning lava slimes and mimics, which are both quite easy to deal with compared to the biome mimics and rune wizards you'd find in other biomes. While this would definitely work to get the mechanical skull to drop sometime in the next few decades, it was by no means efficient. Which is why it was incredibly lucky that literally a day before recording this segment, a guide was put out on the Terraria forums for an incredibly fast mob farm. The farm is so fast in fact that instead of making this video, I took a break to make a video tutorial on how to build it, so I won't go into the build details in this one. All you need to know is that I built it and spent around 7 hours AFKing at it, where I collected almost 3 full stacks of spider fangs, over 800 fried eggs, sold multiple hundreds of poison staffs, and most importantly, gathered up 13 mechanical skulls. A neat little side effect of this is that as long as I'm not reckless, I'll never have to farm money again in this playthrough. Without further ado then, let's get straight into some Medusa attempts. This playthrough was my first interaction with the boss, and it's exactly as terrifying as I had imagined. On my first attempt I managed to deal quite a lot of damage to the destroyer's coiled up tail using the flying knife, but ultimately the sheer number of lasers combined with my lack of knockback immunity was my downfall. On the next attempt I actually managed to take down the destroyer, but the twins and Skeletron Prime soon avenge it. Thankfully defeating any individual boss will still drop a treasure bag, so I used the destroyer's drops to craft a light disc before my next attempt. I once again take down the destroyer, but once again fail to defeat either of the remaining 2 bosses. With the new influx of Souls of Might, I craft the Mega Shark and pivot to a ranged loadout, but the lower defence heavily punishes any bad dodges I make, leading to 3 more deaths in a row. I switch back to melee and take down the destroyer once again, then continue dodging and somehow take down the twins as well. With these bosses and all of Skeletron's arms destroyed, the remainder of the fight is actually super easy, and before long Medusa has been defeated. With all 3 treasure bags from Medusa, I can craft a full set of hallowed armour with the melee mask and test out the damage of the waffle iron, a drop unique to Medusa. Honestly, it's a little underwhelming considering the difficulty of obtaining it, and my existing melee options seem to be much better in either range or damage. My next goal is to get max health through the use of Life Fruit, so I clear out all of my jungle vegetation to give this space to grow and start thinking about how I'm going to take on Plantera. The mechanical glove I can craft with 3 mech souls would be a nice boost to my melee damage, but to get the most out of that I'd need a new weapon, which is a little easier said than done in this map. In normal worlds at this point in progression, you'd have plenty of options through chlorophyte alone. However, in this world without a Hellforge, there's simply no way to smelt this. Another great option, the True Knight's Edge, is also locked off by the lack of a dungeon or hellstone for its components. The Tier 2 Old One's army has some strong weapons and armours, but again is unavailable as I can't defeat an evil boss to get the Tavern Keep. This means I'm going to have to go a little more out of my way to get a good weapon for Plantera, which is why I've been standing here at spawn farming temple enemies for solar tablet fragments. I craft some of these into a solar tablet and unleash the horrors in the hopes of getting a death sickle from Reapers. This is a fairly uncommon drop from a fairly uncommon enemy, so I was hoping that in the process of getting one I'd also get some new bat wings and a moonstone, but surprisingly one dropped just a few minutes into my first solar eclipse, meaning I was stuck with my fairy wings for now. Soon after this the steampunker arrives, so I line the bottom of my Duke Arena with asphalt blocks and fought Duke Fishron another couple of times. Well, these attempts were definitely better than my previous ones, mainly down to the Holy Dodge buff from my hallowed armour. It was unfortunately not quite enough to beat the slimy pigfish, meaning my only path forwards was through plantera. The first half of my first fight goes about as well as 90% of my fights against Phase 1 plantera. Unfortunately, the second half goes about as poorly as 90% of my fights against Phase 2 plantera. Something I did notice is that it appears plantera won't despawn as long as she's being damaged by my nimbus clouds. A rather interesting observation that might come in handy against her. While waiting for another bulb to spawn, I continue grinding attempts against Duke. Truffle worms are pretty easy to come across with a floating platform of mushroom grass, so other than the potion cost, these fights are essentially free, and while I might not win any of them, I certainly get better at Duke's pattern over time. After a few more deaths to Duke, I decided to expand my jungle arena, by which time another bulb had spawned. This fight went almost exactly the same way as the previous one. Phase 1 was no bother and Phase 2 was hell. Luckily I had another bulb just to the right of my mob farm, so I broke it and tried once again. This time I got a little closer, being able to jump back into the fight after dying once, only to die again. This did however give me the idea to ensure that I placed my nimbus rods upon respawning, so I could maybe get another shot. So after another bulb spawns, that's exactly what I do. Defeating plantera would usually give the player quite a lot to do. With new dungeon enemies, you can get a hold of a lot of powerful weapons and one of the best ashes in the game. You can also now use the biome keys on dungeon chests to get some more than viable weapons for each class. Access to Shurmite and Spectre bars unlocks the best range in mage armors pre-Moonlord, and that's not to mention the Pumpkin or Frostmoon events. I have none of that. In fact, all I've gained from this, aside from the direct drops from plantera, are the Witch Doctor selling some new summoner gear, and a few new enemies in the solar eclipse. So off I go to farm the solar eclipse, I guess. This event would be a simple, AFKable affair if not for one particularly annoying enemy, Mothron. On top of being able to travel through blocks, this mob also has a whopping 24,000 health and hits like a truck. So anytime one spawns I have to drop what I'm doing and focus 100% on not letting it kill me before I kill it. A minigame which felt very much weighted in its favour. On the plus side, after my first solar eclipse I managed to get the Deadly Sphere Staff, which is a welcome upgrade to my Optic Staff, and a Toxic Flask, which is a little disappointing for this point in progression. What I was really after is a Nail Gun, which is perhaps the only weapon that can currently increase my damage output against bosses. Regardless, I still tried out my current weaponry against some of the available bosses. All these attempts had made me run low on yet another herb, this time Shiverthorn. And just like the others, I didn't have any seeds to grow more. You'd think after this happened the second time, I would have learned my lesson and prepared a little better. But no. So now I have to lay down all the snow and ice I'd collected from jungle mimics and hope that they grow Shiverthorn sooner rather than later. Surprise surprise, it ended up being later. Almost 2 hours later in fact, and while I may now have a single Shiverthorn seed, it'll take a lot longer to turn that into any usable amount of Shiverthorn. The majority of this time is spent sleeping and occasionally dying to a boss when I get the odd Shiverthorn to make life force potions. Then eventually I decide to spawn the solar eclipse again to once again try for a nail gun. It takes 3 full solar eclipses to get one, but finally I have my hands on the best single target weapon I can get. Despite not being a bow, this weapon still benefits from archery potions and the magic quiver. With the help of the Queen Slime mount, I can spec all of my accessories into damage or survivability, and on my first attempt against Duke with the nail gun, the difference is clear. Now while I may have narrowly lost that fight, it filled me with confidence, and after a few more deaths in his third phase, I finally took down Duke. This victory gave me the Tsunami, which gave me the power boost I needed to take down the Empress of Light. Along with the incredible soaring insignia, the Empress dropped the Nightglow, which deals less damage than the Tsunami but takes a lot less concentration to use, so I switched to it as my main weapon with the Mage loadout. I take her down once again and get another Nightglow, then despite the Wall of Flesh's best efforts, I take her down a third time and get the Starlight, which has one of the lowest ranges of any hard mode melee weapon, and when the Empress can one-shot me with contact damage, there's absolutely no way I'm using this thing. Instead, I keep farming her with my Nightglow, hoping to get her wings, but unfortunately that wasn't meant to be, so I set my sights on Golem instead. While Golem may be a pushover in most playthroughs, he certainly wasn't in this one. The speed of attacks and movement is so much higher than I'm used to, and I can easily die in 2 or 3 hits from his fists. Even still, I managed to crack open the big rock and claim my rather lackluster heat ray. With the defeat of Golem comes the Martian invasion, which I quite liked the sound of until I was face to face with a Martian saucer hurling a volley of lasers at me. I'd like to tell you that I only struggled with this due to some unfair legendary mode change made to the Martians, but as far as I can tell they're the exact same as they usually are. I'm just bad at this event. I slowly make my way through it, but unfortunately couldn't take down any saucers, so tried it again after building a little saucer protection box. This works wonders until the saucer corners me with its laser and I have no option but to take damage, so the next time one spawns I make sure to leave my coward box and face it head on. The saucer rewards me with the Xeno Staff, and while the Influx Waver may have been a better drop, I won't say no to some extra minion damage. This extra damage helps me take down Golem another few times to get a Sunstone, and when I say a few times I really mean 14. None of the weapons he drops are better than what I have already, but the Sunstone and Eye of the Golem can be upgraded into some of the best accessories in the game, so this was well worth my time. Now that I had these and had completed every possible boss and event up to this point, I decided it was time to enter the endgame. I placed down some blocks at the very modest dungeon so that the cultists could spawn, then took down all my snow and ice as it had served its purpose. However, before I picked a fight with the cultists, there was one more thing I needed to do. That's right, more fishing. With my potion reserves replenished, I took down the cultists and started my assault on the lunatic himself. The fight was going very well, in large part due to the fact that I've recently spent multiple hours trying to beat him in Calamity using pre-mech gear as part of my next challenge. I'd barely taken any damage and my Nightglow was shredding through the cultist. Then when I was within a stone's throw of victory and with near full health, this happens. Yup, a barely visible projectile just dealt 665 damage to me, a solid 65 above my maximum health. meaning there's no way for me to survive this attack outside of my hallowed armor dodge. This just means that on my next attempt I try to play it much safer when the Prophecy's End splits, and I also fight it in the underworld for better visibility, which helps dodge this attack. With the lunatic defeated, it was time to take out the pillars. While taking them down, I crafted the Stardust Dragon and Nebula Blaze, then took down the Empress of Light a few times for her wings. And with these upgrades I was finally ready for the Moonlord, or at least I thought I was. After that failure, I used my remaining fragments to craft a Celestial Sigil and summoned him once again, only to die in the exact same way. I would now have to go through the pain of taking down the Cultist and pillars again. And after I did, I fought the Moonlord and once again died to the same attack. Then another attempt, and another death to the boulders. If I was going to beat the Moonlord, I'd have to change strategies, and the first thing I thought of was getting far enough above the ground that the boulders couldn't bounce up and hit me. This meant tearing down much of the world I'd built throughout this playthrough, and there was something quite cathartic about destroying exactly what got me to this point so that I can progress further. It's not like I put any effort into aesthetics in this playthrough anyway. With the arena cleared, there was only one other thing I could think would help: using the cute Fishron mount in the rain. That didn't come quickly though, so I had to spend almost an hour sleeping while hoping the rain would start. When the rain starts, I summon the Moonlord and we begin our battle. A little ways into this, I realise I forgot to change out my accessories, and once I do, my damage is increased significantly. With the speed of the cute Fishron mount, I can much more easily dodge the moon boulders. And now that the arena is so high up, there's no chance of them bouncing back to hit me. All is going really well until I get hit twice in crazy quick succession and lose almost all of my health. I swear I should have had iframes to evade that second attack, but apparently not. At this point I was sure the fight was over, as any one of the Moonlord's attacks could easily finish me off, but somehow I managed to continue to evade him while regaining my lost health, and eventually his core opens, and after another very tense minute, the Moonlord is defeated. I had a lot of fun playing this map, but I will warn you that it's one of the grindiest and most difficult vanilla playthroughs that I've done. If you're looking for a skyblock to play and don't want to deal with the pain of medium core shimmer block, then this is a very good alternative. Outside of the first few hours while you get a workbench, it plays very similarly, to the extent that if you've already played shimmer block then you probably won't gain much from this map. If you haven't though, I'd highly recommend it, just maybe not in legendary mode. Thank you for joining me on this playthrough, and a special thanks to the patrons that joined along the way. I have some exciting new projects coming up that will be posted early to patrons, so if you want to support the channel and be among the first to see those, then consider subscribing to my Patreon using the link below. Once again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.